Well, our journey through the basics of gel photography is coming to an end in this video, as we use Photoshop to put the final finishing touches on this straight out of camera image to produce this final piece of artwork. Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. In the previous video, we used dodging and burning to give the image a sense of three-dimensionality and a stylized look. And now in this final video of this series as a basic look at gel photography, we're going to enhance the image artistically to bring it to its final art. Before we get into Photoshop, I want to take a brief minute to mention a business that I've partnered with, which is Intuition Backgrounds. They design beautiful backgrounds for photography that are applicable from newborns, children, maternity, all the way through others various forms of photography. Some of their backdrops have been designed by some of the most prominent people in our industry, and they are truly beautiful, wonderful designs. The materials themselves, they have canvas, they have different cloth materials that resist wrinkles. They're perfect to use for backdrops, and I'm excited to work with them, designing a new line for them to be used out there on their site. So right now, they have a sale going on through March 31st, 2020, which is a garage sale that has various items on sale. You can learn more about that by visiting their website at intuitionbackgrounds.com. And if you've missed the sale because you found this video after March 31st, that's still fine. Go to the website because you can sign up for information about future promotions that they have or new materials that come to the site itself and new designs. So please check them out. They're a wonderful company. They're a wonderful group of individuals. I absolutely adore working with them, and I'm excited to get started on that series. Now, let's take our final dive into Photoshop for this basic look at gel photography and finish up this artwork. So in the previous video, again, we had done the dodging and burning, so we have our different layers here. And what I like to do is to, again, when I'm working on my own personal projects, I work destructively, so I would flatten all the layers and then move on from there. But to show you how to work non-destructively, what I typically do at this point to preserve these different layers is I will make a composite layer of all of the active layers. All the active layers simply have the little eye icon turned on, which means they're active. So I go to the very top, which this is the group for the dodge and burn layers, and I'm going to hit Control, Alt, Shift, and the letter E for everything, or Command, Option, Shift, and E. And that will make a composite layer that is one layer that has everything active, all the frequency separation stuff, all the dodging and burning stuff. It's all been pushed into that one layer. And then we can start working on that layer in this same document that we have. Or what I typically like to do, so I don't make any mistakes, is I will right click anywhere where there's not a word or a thumbnail on the layer, and I will come to Duplicate Layer. It will bring up the duplicate layer dialog, and you can give it a name like layer 1 copy. That's fine. But what you can do is push it to a new document. So right now it's going to try to copy it into this existing document that we have right here. I'm going to drop down to new, and then I can name the document. So we'll call it Savannah. Which, by the way, Savannah is the name of our model. And if you'd like to see more of her work as a model, she's a truly creative individual. You can visit her Instagram account below to see more of her artwork. So this has now pushed that composite layer into a new document. It's named Savannah, and we have our layer number 1. So I'm going to go ahead and hit F4, which will flatten the image so it'll give it the word background and lock the layer so that we can start adding things on top of it. What do we do to artistically enhance this image? Well, if you've seen other videos on the channel or you've been to some of the conferences that I've taught at, I often talk about how I have a series of actions that I have created that are my artistic styles and looks. And there are different actions for different styles of photography, and I evolve the actions every year. It's essentially my way of continuing to innovate as an artist and change my look as much as possible to stay usually with the times in art where I deal with the Pantone color of the year. When that color changes, I try to find ways to infuse that new color for the year into a new action and a new look for the year. To get you started creating your own look, this is where we can go back to, what was that thing that I said? All right, color, luminosity, and detail. This is the beginning. You can use those 3 elements to start driving you forward to figure out what to do. So let's start with luminosity, because that's what we started with Adobe Camera Raw way back. So luminosity in this image right now, I see the highlights, I see the shadows, and everything looks good. And I love that metallic look, and I want to accentuate all of that. So I can do a variety of different things. And the more that you learn about Photoshop, the more that you'll be able to take more of these various tools and put them together to make your own style. But where I recommend always that people start is the adjustment layers here. So this little icon, the circles, you click that and you have all of these different adjustment layers. These are simply, most of them are the same thing that you would find in Adobe Camera Raw under the basic tab. If you're used to using Lightroom and the develop module in Lightroom, these are the same functions you find there. Hue saturation, you adjust the saturation. The color balance is letting you shift some of the colors there. That's not in Lightroom, but anyway, the hue saturation luminance tab is in Lightroom. It's in Adobe Camera Raw. You have these different options there, plus others that aren't found in those areas. And these adjustment layers are entities on their own that give you control selectively to work on the image as you build your style. So luminosity, let's look at curves. The first thing that I often talk about is I like the matte look, where the black point in the image has been desaturated a little bit, so that into the shadow areas, it's less contrasted and it's a little more matte into it. I like that for standard portraits. For gels, I like it still, but I like to fill in that matte, the lessened black point in the image with a color. So to prepare the matte, simply with the curves adjustment layer, I'm going to come to this anchor point in the bottom left and just bring it up a little bit, which is going to start to desaturate the black point in the image. We get the overall matte effect. And then I'm going to make an anchor point right in the center and bring it back down just a little bit to give us a little bit of that chrome, bring us that contrast back. Again, I'm building a foundation of neutrality in black so I can add color to the shadows that'll come through. So that's the first step for me in the luminosity look that I would want to go for. But a byproduct of that is that it made the image a little bit darker overall. We lost some of the pop, some of the vibrance that we can see here by the matte. So I want to add something in that will undo that, essentially. I'm problem solving. I use color luminosity detail, started with luminosity, and I gave it that matte feeling because I like that. And then I'm going to problem solve it by adding something else into it later on to add some of that brightness back to it. But to continue with that initial train of thought, we did the matte effect and added that into it. I want to now add that color that I'm talking about into the shadows. So I'm going to come to the adjustment windows and I'm going to come up to solid color, which brings up the color picker. Our foreground color is white, so therefore it filled the entire screen with white. This adjustment layer is filled with white. Let's pick a color. And I'm going to pick a color. Let's go with a purple that's getting close to the magentas and those pinks. And we'll go with something like that and hit OK. Now we need to change the blending mode of this layer to let it interact with the layers below and start doing something. So what do I want to do? Well, I want it to fill the darker parts of the image with color. I want it to lighten up those darker areas. So I'm going to come to the blending modes, and the first one that I would think of is lighten, because it's going to lighten the darkness with a color. So in this case, as you can see, it's already just at this intensity is a very interesting stylized look. That's obviously too much in my opinion, but if you like the way it is, great, good for you. So at this point, I didn't mean that sarcastically, but yeah, good for you. So I can take the fill down of this and start introducing some color into that matte. So again, with the matte, we made it, we have a rich black point in the image right now. We added the curves adjustment layer and brought that point up. And so that rich black point is now more neutral, more flat. And we're adding to that flatness a color so that it's giving us that feeling, that stylized look. And I really dig that. Lighten is one blending mode to do it. Soft light is another, where it really lets that color now start playing into the scene. See how much more magenta is in the image now. Much more illuminated. It's also affecting the blue in the background, the blue on her, and turning it more purple. Again, when we looked at the color wheel, remember magenta was close to blue. As it starts to infuse with the blue, it's making purple. So in this case, it's giving us those hints of purple. And what's lovely about an adjustment layer is that it comes with a layer mask. Oh, I'm sorry, we're on overlay. Let's go to soft light. Soft light is like 50% reduction of overlay. And I think I forgot what the algorithm actually does. I think it tells, anyway, so the point is it's now infusing it into the image and giving us those hints of purple throughout the scene, which I dig. And because it has a layer mask, I can start taking it away from areas and painting it out if I don't want it to be there. I can lessen the overall effect again by lowering the opacity of it. But what if I don't want it to be on those blues as strongly? So I'm going to hit B for brush, and I'm going to, my flow of my brush is at 10%. Let's go to 5%. And I'm going to hit the blue areas right here where we know I'm painting white on a white mask is doing nothing. Let's paint some black on the white mask and we'll start taking it away. I want those blues to come through. So I'm painting away this little adjustment layer that we put on top of it and letting some of that come through. Up here, the blue on her hair, we're letting those original colors come through and not have some of the purple potential contamination that's into the scene itself. There we go. So and it's a subtle shift, and hopefully you can see it in the video. Let's zoom in a little bit more. This is with the full effect, that's without. The blue tone is changing as that color is mixing with it. So we just masked it out to let some of that original blue come back through. So luminosity, giving the matte, filling it with some color. The byproduct and the problem of it was, again, we lost some of that contrast. How do we problem solve that? We do an adjustment layer for brightness and contrast. We put it at the top of the layer stack, so it's going to affect everything. Let's change the blending mode down to luminosity, because if we leave it on normal, it's going to affect the contrast and the color at the same time. And that might be a cool look, and we can certainly experiment with that. But let's do it right now for luminosity, so it just deals with color. And let's start introducing some contrast back into the scene. So we have the matte still, because we're building on top of it, but we're introducing contrast back into it, which is really cool. And it's letting us get back into that realm of it. And we can increase the overall brightness potentially with this same adjustment layer to start giving us some of that overall bright that we lost by making the image flat with the curves adjustment layer that was for the matte effect. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that box. And again, the same kind of concept with an adjustment layer coming with the mask. We can potentially paint it away in certain areas if we wanted to, so that we could get the matte effect back. But what if we did it in reverse? Because again, what's our goal with imagery, with photography? Is it to just take some pretty pictures and be like, there it is, right? We want to drive a viewer to look at something. We want the audience. I mean, I take photography for money because I like to get paid. And then I also do the photography for myself as an artist, but I want an audience to look at it, right? So if I want to drive the audience's focus and pull it somewhere, what if I invert this mask and make it hide all? So it hides the entire effect of that contrast. So let's do that. I'm going to hit Control or Command and the letter I for invert. And now the mask is black. It's hidden the entire effect. What if I paint white onto this mask to start revealing it and put it into certain areas that would potentially draw focus for the audience, like her? So instead of it affecting the background, if I start painting some white, let's go to 30%. Just for purposes of the video so you can get in there and see it a little bit more. We're starting to introduce some of that contrast back into it, especially over her eyes and her lips. Let's go to 100% because it's not really putting it down very well. There we go. Now I can start to see it in those black points. Good. A little bit more. And let's change it from luminosity back to normal and increase the contrast. See how going back and forth, we're getting rid of that matte effect. And if we just do it on her hair and her face, just right there, hit Control and 0 to come all the way back out. The variance to luminosity from the entire image, which one is different? Well, from the variance of it, we cannot help but go to her face and see it. Is this too stark of a variation? Yeah, I think it is. So this is one where I would ultimately bring the contrast back a little bit. There we go. So that we're pulling focus by a variance in illumination in the image. Color-wise, we've used a color to enhance the overall illumination that we created with the matte effect. So color, luminosity, and detail. Detail is the last one. There's many different ways to add detail to an image. I'm going to show you two different ones that I really like to use. So first and foremost, I need to make a composite layer of everything that's here. So I'm going to hit that awful Control Alt Shift and E for everything, or Command Option Shift and E. So we have our composite layer at the top, and then I'm going to do a high pass filter to this. So I'm going to come up to Filter, Other, and then High Pass. And that will essentially, I don't know the whole technical aspects of what this does, but it does this. So essentially, I don't know what a high pass really does, but it's giving a lot of dimension to the details, but it gives you this funky view of it right now. We've got to set a radius for the pixels of how much it does this. You have to be careful how far you go with this radius of pixels. The higher you take it, the more that you introduce halos around all of the edges of the person and any perimeter in the image of a subject in the image. There's going to be a burned halo around, and it's very visible, and it just doesn't look that good. I'm going to take this to, like, let's go 4 pixels and hit OK. So if we zoom in, and again, hopefully on the YouTubes you can see this, this is the high pass of this top layer. We need to change the blending mode to let it interact with the layers below. The ones that you would use for this would be like soft light, hard light, or linear light. I'm going to use soft light. It's going to give us an overall sharpening to this image that is minimal. I'm going to turn it off and on. Look at her face before and after. It's a minimal sharpening. Hopefully, again, you can see that in the video here on the YouTubes. But if not, trust me, it's giving it a sharpness to the entire thing. So I love that simple base of sharpening first. Now I'm going to make another composite layer of this whole thing, including the high pass. So Control Alt Shift and E, or Command Option Shift and E to get this top layer. And this layer I'm going to take back into Adobe Camera Raw as a filter. This isn't a raw file. This is a layer in our document. I'm going to take it into Adobe Camera Raw. I'm going to hit Control Shift and A, or Command Shift and A to go back into Adobe Camera Raw and use it as a filter. And this is where we're going to use sharpening. But on the Basic tab, new to CC 2018, 2019, I think, was the texture slider. And the texture slider is wonderful because it doesn't give a lot of noise to the image. It just does a wonderful job of starting to increase the overall textures globally, making that global change. And I really like that. The clarity slider is like an HDR effect. It deals with the midtones in the image as well and enhances some of that. So I'll give it a little bit of a punch there of clarity. And then dehaze. Dehaze to me is like, it's meant to remove haze from a photo. To me, it's like contrast 2.0. Instead of moving the actual contrast slider here, if you move dehaze a little bit, you can start to give it just a little bit more contrast in all the colors and light, which is counteracting the curves adjustment layer that introduced that matte effect. Then we'll come to sharpen, and we can simply start increasing the sharpening. Now, what I like to do is to increase the sharpening along all of the lines, the leading lines of the image, of her face, of her body, and so forth. And to be able to see those, we need to simply mask it in. So this masking slider, you can't really see it very well, but if you hold Alt or Option, it turns this into simply a layer mask. Yes, a layer mask. So white is going to reveal the sharpening effect. Black will take it away. This image is kind of creepy and is going to make me wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning screaming, but I will sacrifice that for you all on this channel. So as I slide the mask further over, again, white reveals. So just those little simple lines is where the sharpening will take place. So as I continue to increase the amount of sharpening, it's just doing it very minimally in those areas because of the masking. We can do some noise reduction as well, which helps some of the byproduct of too crisp of pixels in the image if you go too far with the texture slider or high pass or whatever else. But once we've made some of those changes and we hit OK, it processes Camera Raw as a filter. And now we've got a nice, beautiful, artistically enhanced picture. Truly, this is my process. There's a couple of little other adjustment layers I would add to it, but they're very minimal, and they all function on the same ideology of color, luminosity, and detail. If we were to, we could add some lens flares to this to mimic the strobes that were on set. We could add some glows to it. We could add a vignette to it to really drive the audience's focus in. These are subtle little finishing moves, so to speak. Finishing moves like a video game. Like this is like Street Fighter, or like what was the game that I used to play all the time? Killer Instinct. That was such a fun arcade. How did we get off topic? Anyway, these are different final steps you can take to the artwork to really give it that final touch. And again, what's the goal? Driving the audience's focus, fulfilling your artistic vision, and sharing this artwork with the world. I hope this basic look at gelled photography demystifies some of the fear factors or unknowns, and will give you the encouragement to try it and work with it. Gels themselves, gel material, you can use, there's colored saran wrap that you can buy. You can find gel materials on sites like Amazon or other companies that you Google. They have different gel materials. There's a company, Magmod, makes wonderful portable modifiers for lighting. And they have a nice little grid system, gel system with grids that just magnetically attaches to their mounts over speedlights and smaller lighting instruments. Find some gels. Find complementary colors using the color wheel. Get a subject and experiment. Experiment with a couple of gels as just accents, whether they be kickers on the subject or for the background. Put gels on all the lights and start telling the story with color. Take the image into Adobe Camera Raw, process it as a foundation for Photoshop. Use the retouching techniques of frequency separation and dodging and burning to enhance the image, to retouch it, but to give the stylized look, and then complete the process here using adjustment layers. And if you're uncomfortable with adjustment layers in this step of the game for you for Photoshop, then save the file, export it out to Lightroom. Use Adobe Camera Raw as a filter to do those final artistic enhancements, because Lightroom's Develop module was built off of Adobe Camera Raw. It's the same thing. It's just a different user interface. I mean, I'm sure there's other things inside of the library. But anyway, my point is, whatever is the most comfortable process for you to artistically enhance an image, do it. But try this. Step into it. I challenge you to do this because it's a wonderful, beautiful art form to work in, a genre of photography in various forms like, you know, again, glamour, boudoir, it's standard portraiture, high school seniors. I mean, I don't know if a newborn would look good in gels, but maybe, who knows? It could be a whole new field of photography. So thank you for watching this basic look at gel photography. There's going to be more videos on the channel that cover more advanced elements of retouching for gel photography, as well as photography on set. We'll have videos where I'll actually show you the lighting and talk about some of the posing and so forth, and move forward in that way. So thank you for watching this. Please consider liking the video if you liked the content, because again, that will feed the YouTube algorithm and let them know that this channel has information and content that is valuable and worth the masses on YouTube. YouTube is the new platform that I'm using now, coming back to it to push all of the education that I offer online. I've been a part of Patreon for a while and I love my career on Patreon, but I'm simply moving back to YouTube for the reach of the audience and the metrics that I can share with businesses so I can create new relationships with them. So please, I'm asking you to help me out by giving me a like to the video. And if you like the content, you like the way that I teach, and you like my artistic work, then please subscribe to the channel, because there is a lot more content coming and I'm so excited to go down this journey. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you out there in the world of Photoshop.